This is episode 34 of Radio Artes, a podcast by Studium Generale Artes. Hey there, and welcome back. A while ago, we dropped the first episode in the series Research in Art Education. In this series, artist researcher Fabiola Camuti interviews students, researchers, and managers working in the University of the Arts to discuss the importance, challenges, and possibilities of conducting research within arts academies. Now, in that first episode, we briefly touched upon a tool developed by a team at the Willem de Kooning Academy called the Circle of Doing Research. But because it was our first episode and there were other subjects part of it, we didn't have time to fully dive into that subject. So in this episode, episode 2, we do just that. And by we, I mean them, being Fabiola Camuti and the team at the Willem de Kooning Academy, because that's who I'm going to hand you off to now. Enjoy.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second episode of the Research in Art Education podcast series. My name is Fabiola Camuti. I am senior researcher and educator at Artes University of the Arts, and I coordinate the research working group of KUO, the arts sector of the Universities of Applied Science in the Netherlands. For our second episode, we'll discuss the importance of research within educational programs in our academies with 3 guests who have agreed to join our conversation today. In this episode, we will go directly into the practice of doing research, discussing the possibility of working with an iterative model for developing, evaluating, and sharing one's own research process and project. With me today are the creator of this model, Jojanneke Gijzen, Harma Staal, and Mirjam Rasch from the Willem de Kooning Academy. Thanks for being here today. Jojanneke, Mirjam, Harma, maybe if you could introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Jojanneke. I'm a researcher, art historian, and art educator and educational developer.
So many things. Hi, I'm Mirjam. I'm the coordinator of the research station and writer of many different things.
Hey, and I'm Harma. I'm a graphic designer by origin, and I'm a research tutor in various departments of the academy, and I'm a developer of education as well.
Thank you. And I'm very, very happy that you're here today because we had the chance already in our first episode to discuss briefly something about the circle of doing research. That's the name that you developed and created with your students and colleagues. And I'm very happy because we can at least go a little bit in depth. What does it mean of working with the circle? So my first question is actually quite general. I would like to ask you if you can tell us something about how about the circle you developed, how that works, and how can this help students in their practice with research?
Yeah, so I think we started work on the circle already a couple of years ago, and it was really as a means to provide an answer to this question of what does it mean to do research in an art academy. We saw all these students doing fantastic research, but not recognizing that they were doing research. We also saw that in many different departments, people talked about research in their own specific ways and teaching their own specific methods, which is completely fine. But there was a great need to have kind of a shared vocabulary. So that's what we wanted to create, a simple open model that can be applied in many different disciplines and departments. And that is also, like non-linear, open to different talents, open to different kinds of doing research. I guess another thing is that many students, but also teachers, have this kind of preconceived idea that research is, first of all, hard, but also like you have to read a lot of books or you have to go into the library first. While, of course, in an art and design context, it's also about making. It's also about working with people. And that can be just as well the start of a whole research process. So in the circle, we have these different areas or actions that describe this process of doing research, and it help in articulating that process and in kind of showing how your trajectory in your research process looks like and how you could take steps in that. And well, mainly there are two big parts of the circle. The underlying circle is where it is about generating materials and data. So it's by research by making, research of context, and participatory research. And then on top of these three, there is what we call the spinner, but everyone has their own name for it, which is kind of what makes the motions, going through all this data and making it into research as it is by documenting research, making public, and reflection. So it's this double thing, and it's really meant to be in motion and not a static circle, but really a process. So that's in short, but we can discuss in more details what.
Yeah, because you mentioned, of course, it's also the very own name, the circle of doing research. So there are two words that are, for me, very important also when it comes to practice research, practice-based research, artistic research, and is the idea of doing, so something that is in action, practical, and based on the practice also, and the circular idea, so the fact that it is an iterative process, so that there's a possibility of repeating, evaluating, and going back. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the different components and how, or give us examples on how those can be combined and how to move or practically from one to the other as if nobody ever heard of the circle. How would you explain it?
First of all, it's important to recognize that each student can develop his own practice, so to say, and also his own research habits, his or her own making habits. So the circle is meant to recognize that my process can be about, I start with making, then I need to document it, and while documenting it, I need to reflect on it. While reflecting on it, I need to go back to making, or I can think I need some more context. I want to understand what I am doing, and I will talk to experts. I will dive into publications of others on my subject. So this constant going back and forth in the actions that are present in the circle is, I think, the most important thing. And what I said in the beginning, the fact that each student has a different order of doing things, and maybe even each project asks for a different order of things, but it's constantly very dynamic, moving from action to action, going back, doing it again, understanding what you're doing by documenting or by making it public. So the process is continuous, and even at the end of a research process, you could say that the new iteration already starts because you understand what the outcomes are about.
Yeah, thank you. And one thing that makes the circle, I think, very open and approachable is that it doesn't identify specific levels of working with research. So what I understand is that this is actually created for students to work on their own research and with their own research already from the first year.
Yes, that's true. So we use the circle of doing research already, well, in the first weeks or the very first week even of the first year to just explain to students, this is what research is about here in the academy. It's also about demystifying the notion of research. It's about really showing them, like, you can bring your talents to the table and start it from there, but to also, make clear that there are all these different elements that might not speak to you immediately, but they are there and you can use them in your own process. So it's definitely already there from week one, and then we try to develop also learning lines all the way up to year 4, and that's something that Janneke is working on as well.
We start for every student, no matter what discipline or what major they have. they start with a crash course. And this crash course, already like in the first month of their studies, they get acquainted with the circle. And this is just by an introduction and also by interview with an alumnus. So with this interview, we try to just entangle the process of the research of the student. This is very approachable for those students. And then we're going to repeat it in the second year, third year. But in the fourth year, as a start of their final studies, we are developing different workshops on each field of the research, so every aspect. So, and one day they have kind of kick-off with lots of workshops to choose from, but all related to the circle. So it's the kind what we really believe in, that we need to that it's a repetition, and that each year some part of the circle is coming back. So it's not something that's separate from their studies, but it's really integrated in their learning trajectory through 4 years. But it's not only for the bachelors. So I think it's also, we see this thing also as a research process itself. So this is a start also looking at the bachelors for our own process.
This is something that really speaks to me when it comes to trying to create a sustainable conversation about research in education and research and education. Because what we know, what we can see many times is that our students start to approach research or artistic research from year 3. And many times this causes, and I have in my experience also working with my students, some kind of confusion, as if all of a sudden, oh, I thought I was doing something practical, and then all of a sudden I have to connect it to something called research. So for me, what makes the circle very interesting is that every year that goes by, a certain level of depth can be applied to the research and the research process of the student. And do you have examples that you maybe saw? Because you said you started working with it a couple of years ago. So I guess now you have also collected examples and evaluation of this practice?
A bit. What we do is, of course, we set out workshops and ways to work with it for students and teachers. But of course, by now the departments are starting to work with the circle as well. And that's really nice, because there you see that existing learning lines were scanned in the beginning to make the circle and to create the circle bottom up with our colleagues. And on the other hand, you see that in these learning lines, the elements, the actions that are present in the circle are also already partly present in their curriculum. But the shared vocabulary right now helps us all to really point at here, for instance, dealing with the other or dealing with audience is something for a second year graphic design. Is how they start to deal with where are the people, where are the others, and how do you as maker relate to the others. So that's facets of making public. Participatory. Another example is that material research that happens in the first and in the second year needs documentation. So there there's the connection of making, and then there is the question of how does making become research, and then there's the question of how to document what I make. And if I do material studies and I have loads of versions, I need to document it and I need to reflect on it in order to have a good documentation of this process. So that's a second year level. But for instance, in the third year, we are looking at internships also.
Yeah, we right now with one of the departments, we are looking whether normally the internship was really apart from the research part. And the research they still thought of doing theory, of reading books, reading materials, reading stuff, and writing. And then together with this department, we developed a crash course with the alumnus interview in order to see the connection between all the different fields. And this works already, they recognize this and they see that the making, the testing, the talking with their stakeholders is really could be a part of their research and not as a separate line. So this is already that we see that departments are asking us like if we could develop something special, and they recognize this. And this department, they used to work with the double diamond theory, and they said we don't want the double diamond anymore. we do think this is a better solution for our students.
So it is working.
So it's really working.
That's already a good thing. And I would like to go back to something that Harma briefly mentioned, this idea of bottom up, because I think it what makes probably the circle turns it into a working system. Let's say the fact that if I understood correctly, this has been developed and created by you within the research station, but this didn't come as some kind of top-down idea of this is how we do research here, and you have to follow it. So can you tell us a little bit about this process of co-creation about the model?
Yes, we at the beginning, well, when this problem emerged, what is research and what languages do we use, we decided to go talk to our course leaders, and we decided to scan the existing curricula with them, and we looked at in what way is research already present in your curriculum. Of course, it's there. Maybe there's the language problem and everyone uses its own terms, words and methods, but it's there. So we scanned it quite properly, and we had those conversations with all course leaders on how research is already present. And we made the 6 actions sort of grew amongst the 3 of us, but also through the conversations. And then at a certain point, we decided to make it visual already. So we put a sort of conversation model, a designed visual model on the table, a big tablecloth, so to say, and we started talking around the presence of these actions. So how is this with you? And we could make notes on, okay, this is maybe participatory research, isn't it? So we could exchange on the ideas of, is it participatory, or is it something else, or is it making public? So gradually everyone grew into using this language that we sort of proposed and designed together, and we were working along this visual model, and the model was changing bits and pieces because we, of course, needed to become really clear of how the actions are related and how the circle actions versus the spinner actions, what is it about? Why do we do it like this? So designing it, talking about it, making changes, our own iterations was really part of the whole process. And that was really good because course leaders were introduced in a very early stage. So they started working with it immediately because they felt it was theirs as well. That was really good move, I think, we made.
And this way we also see this entire process as our own research project. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think it's a good example that we have worked with like a conversation piece. We talked with people, we did our research ourselves in books, and we looked at the situation, and and it's still a process. I don't think we are finished with this research ourselves.
But it makes it really interesting, the fact that the idea of practice what you preach is in fact what you have applied. So working with participatory research or participatory action research, which is one of the methodologies that we often use in our academies, is in fact what you have done. And this also gives ownership to the course leader in this case, or to all the alumni you have talked to, and this, I think, is what makes it more accessible and easier to work with for the people involved, because it's not just something that has been just dumped on them, but they have been part of this and they have agreed with this.
Yeah, and I think that it's also been very good that we got the opportunity to immediately translate it into an educational program. Mm-hmm. So the crash course in year 1, it was, well, right from the start also a goal that we had, that we didn't just want to have a model and then give it to the others, like you work with it now or something, even if it's bottom up, but that we also had something that we could provide to all the different disciplines. So, I mean, we see all first-year students, which are, I don't know how many hundreds of them, which is super nice. So it's also about, I guess, the organizational or formal opportunity, I guess, that you have to also put it into action. So it's not just the action that you do in making the research, but also the action in really adding your own curriculum based on your research. So that has been very good for us as well. And then, also being able to take it to QO, and there have been all these different contexts that we could kind of apply our own work in, and that has all fed back into it, which has made it just very robust, I guess, while still being so open and transparent. Yeah.
And in fact, it still works as a kind of conversation model, because we have departments who have are more specific in their language, like the teacher training department, whereas making is also about making education. So the two. And this is also part of our research, that we're talking with them and not redeveloping the model, but small. We make kind of small adjustments in language. Mm-hmm. So the model remains the same. But there's in the language and the descriptions, we do a small iteration together with the department, and this is how. So it's an ongoing process. This research.
Yeah, it's not set in stone. As it
no.
is. That's nice. And do you have maybe examples of directly of some projects or students' projects that you have seen developing within working within the circle that you maybe can share?
Fourth year students this is a bit difficult, because the fourth year students, we have 1 year that we just start with this kickoff, and they didn't work from the beginning. So because we're just in this midst of the process. But with the alumni interviews, it's this is really interesting. We're talking when we interview them, and talking in these interviews, they are rethinking their own process, and they really get a grip on their own process. I don't know if you recognize this, Harma. Yeah, that they're looking back at their own trajectories. They understand it more, and they also they are able to connect it to the latest developments if they're already in the working field. And this is, I think, already kind of starting point. So it's too early to see if we could see a difference, but this is what we already see that they recognize.
Then you're saying that this also gives them some kind of framework to self-reflect also on what they have done and what they're doing now in the field.
Yeah, I guess we have quite numerous examples of students seeing the light, so to speak. Do you mean I already did my research? Yes, but because they have this idea of a very academic form of research, they didn't recognize that, going out into the field or collecting materials or talking to people, that was actually also part of their research. So, those are really nice moments where you can help a student recognize their own process and also in that way shape it better, because then you also, to ask a good question and to find answers or possible answers, you also need to know what your data is and what belongs to it, So yeah, that's something that we hear a lot also from teachers, that it's really a way of making the students aware that they already do a lot, and it's also about becoming conscious of the or turning your process into a conscious and articulated process that is really a big part of the research itself.
And in fact, it helped also with reformulating the graduation guide.
Yeah, that's also a good example.
Yeah, because we were looking at the graduation guide, and we saw that there's still in the description of the research, it was still a kind of it was not really specific that the making was part of the research. It felt like separate realms. And
just a bit traditional, this separation of first you do your research and then you make your artwork, while the whole model is based around you start with making, researching, reading, talking to people, and all of this feeds into one process. And then in the end, so that's kind of how we reformulated it. In the end, you have two outcomes, and one is an artwork, and one is maybe a report on the whole research that you did. But it's all part of the same process, and it's not like first you do this and then you do that.
By including also, if I hear talking about this, is also includes anyway a certain form of rigor when it comes to research. Because many times, as a researcher myself, I notice it when I talk to students about research. This is what scares them the most. The idea that rigorous, as if being rigorous means, this really dark place where you don't want to go. But actually, what is really, what makes... let's say the circle makes rigor also accessible, because in fact it gives frameworks to work with, and there you can find your rigor. And so you mentioned, for example, the idea of to formulate a good question, a good research question. It takes quite some steps. It's not just every time that I say that I try to have these conversations about research in education, many people respond, but we always do research because we always start with a question. And then I always have the same stupid joke. I say, like, every evening, I also ask myself, okay, what are we going to eat tonight? And that's a question, but that's not a research question. So what is it that makes a research question valid?
Well, valid. I don't know.
Valid. Okay, maybe that goes too far. But
I think it's really important what you say, that it already takes quite some steps before you get to a good research question. So you don't start with it. It's something that develops over itself, and then after you have your first draft of your research question, there's also iterations on the question, and that's probably, something that is quite specific maybe for the artistic or the design context. So that the question that you ask, it develops with your inquiries into your topics. And that, you can see that also as scary and dark, I guess, but it's also something that, that maybe is a bit, more open or fluid. And then, this also taps into this discussion that is heard more often, I think, also in QO. Like, it can also come to look as if everything we do is research, and that's not what we want to communicate, right? So not everything in an art academy is research. It might all kind of touch upon research, or it could all be related to a research process. But I think especially this kind of rigor and going back and the iteration, the asking of questions, and like very conscious reflection, that is what makes the research. While there's also just like the flow of making, or all these other things that also have a part in an art academy, I would say. So it's an interesting question that we often refer to. When does making become research?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, and I think it also helps, like, if talking about research question, that it for students in bachelor's program, the how questions. How can I, as a designer, really helps them to overarch like the different angles of doing research, because in the how question, the making is kind of already included, and so this helps them, and I think this.
Yeah, I think even one step back, these first year students, one of the most important things I tell them is that they should start to realize that they are always wondering about something. So learning to raise questions is learning to recognize that actually I am wondering about what this material will do if I fold it. Or what this writer thinker meant with this, that, or that, or what did the other artist do there, or what is water doing to a certain surface, whatever. It's always being curious, wondering about things, and slowly reformulating these wonderings into small questions. So, and then they're in this right, I say, position. But that's interesting in this fourth year process, that this beginning feeling of you're wondering about something, that is what they recognize. So that's always a good start. And then they always nod like, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I'm constantly wondering about
Yeah, but that's definitely the starting point.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can
yeah,
imagine.
yeah.
Now that we have listed all the, let's say, positive and beautiful things about the circle, I'm also really interested in the pitfalls of working with such a model, and also of approaching the model in a co-creative way. So do you have examples for that, or can you imagine that, some pitfalls that could come from this kind of work?
Yeah, well, pitfalls, I'm not sure, but everyone steps into it from coming from his own perspective. That stays, whether it's a disciplinary perspective or an interdisciplinary perspective. You see your own ways of making, ways of thinking, and ways of developing. So what the pitfall could be is that people sort of withdraw again and go back into their own domain of thinking and language. And that is why we think we need to constantly stay on top of it, because it's not that we want to say you need to do it, but it's good that we remind people constantly that we are working on this shared language, and that it's amongst us as colleagues. It's good to co-create and co-develop education with this shared language, and it's good for tutors to express this language to students. And sometimes we feel, oh, you're actually talking about stuff and you're not mentioning elements from the circle at all. And then I feel like, oh, that's a bit of a loss. Mm-hmm. So for now, I think we still need to sort of exaggerate almost what the model can do, or what the actions mean to makers.
Maybe I can pose as a counterpoint to that. There's, of course, always things that are not mentioned in the model, and that's also a little bit what people then bring to it, like, oh, but where is this and where is that? We had numerous discussions about where is the I or the researcher, him or her or themselves. But what I also find important is to stress that it's not complete, you know. So there should be some space for like intuition or the unexpected or just the weird stuff that also happens when you do artistic research, you know. So I would say it's a danger or pitfall might be that it's that the model becomes too prescriptive or closed off. Well, it's not meant like that, but I also just hope that people break out of the model, you know, just like, or resist the model. That's that's also very important that's possible. But it starts with just, you know, having everyone learn and see that you can do research and you can do it in your own way, and then some of us jump out of it.
I think another point of attention for us is to use it in communication and information, because, for instance, if we have to deal with our website, and we deal with all the sort of methods that belong to certain actions or certain workshops we develop. They belong, like, this is really clearly about documenting and this is clearly about reflecting. But we have constant discussions and constant problems between marks about where to put it, because everything that happens in doing research is related to something else. So it's not, that's why the design of the circle is about dotted lines, because it should really be open, and the relations between the actions are actually what make it good research. So to deal with the problem of how do we design our website, and do we do these 6 actions with underlying methods and workshops, it immediately clashes, because, okay, it's here, but it's also there. So there we constantly think of what is the biggest, what is the overarching action? Is it right, or is it related to something else? And how do we deal with it? So, but I don't know if it's a pitfall. It's very interesting.
No, but it's definitely and let's say a point of attention.
Yes.
And you mentioned the dotted line, so which reminds me that it might be important to mention to those who are listening that what makes the research circle really accessible is the fact that it's visual. So, and now we're just talking about it. So maybe the best way is also to visit the website of the research station at Willem de Koning, and there you can also find it. And there also on the website of Studium Generale Artes and Apria, there will be publication soon coming. I have another question, maybe about the critical points. Just I was thinking, how does the circle relate to evaluation processes?
This is something that we're really interested in, and I think this is part of our future research because evaluation is like we're working here on the academy, but it's too long story, but with competencies. So we were and competency assessments, really big part of our evaluation, and so we're really looking if we and could we combine the two, or how does this relate? But if we're talking about evaluation, it helps students to evaluate their process. It helps tutors to evaluate their curriculum. So in this way, it helps evaluating the process of the day. But if we're talking about evaluation, we're not so far that we could see, like in 4th year's program, evaluation is done by using the circle and whether. So this could be a longer term process, but we're not there at the moment.
Yeah, but for instance, we're talking with the SACs also because, of course, it's a clear instrument also to think about precision. Yourself as maker, like what habits do I have, what type of maker or research am I, and then the model can also help. But that is all under development, I would say, that we see lots of opportunities on different domains in the academy to start working with it on another level.
Are the students, let's say, in the research process also evaluated about the research they do based on the different steps in the circle?
You mean also like really assessed or graded?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not happening as of now. No. So it's for now really mostly like a reflective tool. So maybe evaluation, it can be both like assessment and reflection, and it's definitely more on the reflective side. But we also hear from teachers who use the circle to help their students in the reflection. But, that's different from assessing or grading.
Yeah, connecting it to the general assessment. Last question for today, because you Janneke, you mentioned working with the competences of the students, and in the Universities of the Arts, we work, of course, in different disciplines, and the disciplines are let's say, regulated in different networks. So the fine arts, the teacher training programs, the theater, dance, music. You have mostly developed your circle within fine arts design programs, I suppose. How do you see different iteration of this model for different disciplines?
As a matter of fact, and the coming Monday, I have a talk with a research guide, a tutor in 4th year's code arts. And we're talking about how to develop or or how to adjust the circle for, and this is teacher training program of code arts.
Yeah, so music.
And how this model could be used by them, and talking about the making. And so this is the first iteration. We already did this with the teacher training department here at the Willem de Koning, and we already, what we already said before, that the making is there a bit more made specific. So these are coming iterations as first steps. So we see possibilities. And
that's nice, yeah. I can also imagine that then also it comes to a different lexicon and a different kind of vocabulary and semantics. So what do we mean by theory that changes from the different disciplines? And working in a participatory way can be perceived in a different kind of way in the different disciplines, depending on how you apply it. I would like to thank you for today, and I hope that we can have further conversation. And I look forward, of course, to see the publication about the circle. And it will be, of course, really interesting at some point after maybe, 4 years' time to hear also from students and alumni who have really worked hard with the circle to know what they learned from it. Thank you all. Thank you, Janneke. Thank you, Miriam. And thank you, Harma.
Thank you.
And we'll see each other so soon.
Definitely.
Bye.